Hello, all, and welcome to another episode of Your One Black Friend. I'm your hostess, Joli, or you can call me JoJo the Storyteller. I've been thinking I needed a new tagline, and I like that. I like JoJo the Storyteller. I like telling stories. As you guys may or may not have noticed, I enjoy stories because they have a way of getting people to think in a way that is indirect, right? You can still deliver a message, but with a bit of entertainment. So you make the message fun. And for those of you who are new to the channel, what we do here is we explore concepts, ideas, philosophy, the esoteric, things that a lot of people actually do think about in the privacy of their own minds, but are afraid to express publicly for fear of judgment or ridicule, rather. I know this because whenever I put out an episode, the feedback I consistently get in emails and comments and things like that is I'm really grateful for you talking about this stuff because I thought I was crazy. I do wish we lived in a society where free thinking, playful thinking, explorative thinking was encouraged and welcome so that people don't think that there's something inherently wrong in contemplating the nature of their reality. But such is the world that we live in. It is what it is. I like JoJo the Storyteller because I think that is very encompassing of what I am and what I exist to do. So even with my books or with paintings or with any sort of art, there's always a story. We do live in what appears to be a narrative fiction. Our world seems to be a reality that consistently draws up stories. If you pay attention to the way we communicate with one another, there's always a story. History is a story. Math is a story. Our whole fabric of our reality seems to be based on storytelling. And so there's something to be said about embracing that. Even in sales, in marketing, it's always about, can you tell a story? With branding, can you tell a story? Everything in our reality seems to be about a story. Everything in our reality seems to be telling a story. You watch a seed being planted and you watch it grow and through these different stages. That is a visual story. Our reality appears to be a construct that largely tells stories. Everything is a story. And so I figured, you know what? We'll lean into that. I had a friend of mine, shout out to Sam. For those of you, by the way, who have not signed up or heard of, because I've not been actually promoting my other channel, my subscription channels, I have it available on YouTube and also on Ko-fi, ko-fi.com, and ko as in ko.fi.com/Joli Artist. I have some stuff that I like talking about, but I don't put it out in the public. And so there's some videos out there. There's a really great interview with my friend Sam, who is another storyteller. She tells story through film, and it's a 2-part series. It's worth watching just for the information that's contained within. So just putting that out there, do with the information what you will. But she had sent me a video about, I think it was on Twitter or X, I guess. Elmo had posted a tweet and he'd said, well, how are you guys doing? And people proceeded to kind of spam Elmo, a character from Sesame Street, for those who are unfamiliar. And Sesame Street being a kids' television show that has aired, I think, since like the 60s or 70s. It's been on for a very long time on PBS. So great marketing, I guess, for them to sort of have that going. But kids who grew up watching the show are now full-blown adults. And they proceeded to respond to Elmo's queries of how things are going in their life. And the responses were a bit drab, to say the least. It was, a lot of people complaining about being genuinely and generally unhappy with their lives. And my response to that was, what if? What if? I'm trying to paraphrase it. I wonder if I should look it up. Hold on. I'm just going to read what I said because, right. So my response was, what if Elmo feeds on the misery of the children who watched him when they were children and now have his image imprinted in their psyche? What holds the image of Elmo becomes Elmo. And what if all these responses of suffering are actually what sustains him and gives him life, considering that he is a seemingly immortal sock puppet? Say that 3 times fast. Okay, so that's not a normal response to somebody sending a video of Elmo. It's just not. But it was a fun response, and it's reflective of how my brain works. Everything is a potential story. You can see a cat walking down the street, and you can invent a narrative around it. It doesn't mean that the narrative necessarily has to be true. In fact, I prefer it if it wasn't true, because I prefer questions to answers. The thing about a question is that, particularly when it's open-ended, it allows the mind to sort of expand, to sort of play. It puts you in a state of play in the way that an answer does not. Once you've gotten an answer, it's pretty definitive. It goes, okay, what's 1 + 1? It's 2, right? And from that point on, when you get the answer, you stop thinking. But if you ask more questions about what is 1 + 1, and can 1 + 1 sometimes be 1? Can 1 + 1 sometimes be 3? Right? You see how the questions generate something different in your mind as opposed to just when you're given an answer. So we live in a society that encourages people to just learn the answer, not to question the question, and not to come up with more questions of their own. And I think as a result of that, we end up losing a lot of our creativity and our mental flexibility. That sort of thinking is ingrained from childhood to adulthood. And more people are starting to take notice, for better or worse, and I don't know if it's going to make a difference, that the education system in our country and in the West largely kind of stifles creativity, stifles free thinking. But it does that because the purpose of our education systems is not to create individuals who can think freely and think outside the box. The purpose of our education system is to create individuals who are very good at following orders, who are very good at regurgitating what they've been told and then doing what they've been told. They're very good at memorizing answers. They're not good at asking questions, but you shouldn't be asking questions if you are working as an employee for somebody else. Your job is not to ask questions. Your job is to do your job, shut your mouth, right? That's how we live here in the West. The thing is, though, with the emergence of AI, with the emergence of programs like ChatGPT and things like that, the questions are becoming more and more important than the answers themselves. The ability to ask the right questions, to frame a question in the right way so that the answer actually improves the circumstances, situations, life, your life. That is going to become more and more important as time goes on, as things start to shift, because you no longer need to be able to memorize answers. Anything I need to know, all the things that I grew up having to memorize, a multiplication table, it is very important. And I tell this to my daughter all the time. It is important for you to be able to know how to do these things, but more for the mental exercise of using your brain in that way. Because if you don't use your brain, you lose your ability to do that. But I think what's more important is creativity, is challenging the status quo. Because now that we have a tool like AI that allows us to sort of expand our minds, you have to then ask yourself, well, how can we use this tool that always gives us answers? How can we ask the right questions in order to expand our society, in order to grow our society to a place that's not just where we have individuals now who are just being, bred for the propagation of DNA and, to be employees and to live, work, and die. I think within the next 5 to 20 years, what it means to be human in the West, particularly, will start to change. And I think it's us now and people who have a predisposition towards free and creative thinking to really step up, because it's these thinkers who are asking the right questions. And I mean thinking in the sense of actually applied problem solving, not listening to your internal monologue talk shit, as I talked about in the previous episode. So if we live in a society where we now have a calculator that can give us the answer, well, the answer is important, but not quite as important as the question. And as I'm talking about this, I'm thinking about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? What is the answer to life, the universe, and everything? And this, the big think computer spits out the answer, it's 42. But then the next step is, okay, well, that's the answer. Then what is the question? And then the entire planet Earth was actually ended up being a giant computer that was meant to generate the question. Because the question, what is the question to life, the universe, and everything? What is that actual question? Was actually more important than the answer 42. The answer is meaningless without the right question. So can we structure ourselves? We start as an individual. Can you structure ourselves so that your mind is now set up in a way where you can ask the right questions and then apply the answers towards improving the quality of life of not just you as an individual, but also as for the collective as a whole? Hope that made sense. So that is and is going to continue to be the nature of this podcast as we continue to grow. It's going to be storytelling. It's going to be asking the big questions, the fun questions, the challenging questions, the mind expanding questions, circling around what if. So here's another question. What if it is possible for you to be so entangled with other versions of yourselves? And by selves, I mean the cell, I mean the physical body, in parallel universes, along with the consciousness that inhabits these versions of your body in a parallel universe. Are you so entangled with them that should, for example, a version of you in a parallel universe die, the consciousness that is housed within that avatar, within that body, that cannot experience death, can shift into your present form, thus increasing your level of consciousness? Now, I've talked about this in the past, several episodes here and there. I've talked about this on the podcast, I hinted at it, and I also talked about it not to a great length in the book, So You're Living in a Simulation, but certainly we did touch up on it in the book. And so for those of you who've read the books, you should be familiar with what I'm discussing here, at least for a brief intro. I've also talked about NPCs within a simulated reality. If this is a simulated reality, there has to be individuals who are generated and controlled by the game, that they seem conscious, they seem aware, the way ChatGPT seems aware and seems intelligent, but it's obviously, and it's a simulation of a human level of intelligence. And if you generate a video game, if you go and you play a video game, there are subscribers within the game who are obviously, quote, conscious players, but then there are NPCs that look like the avatar that you're playing with and sound like the avatar that you're playing with. But there's certain limitations because those characters are programmed by the game. Now, as more and more video games emerge, you'll find that they're going to start incorporating AI. And so that line between that's definitely an NPC and that is a human subscriber within a game is going to blur to the point where you may not even be able to fully distinguish between a human player and an AI, unless, of course, programmers of the game put in cues to make it so that you can easily or more easily identify whether or not you are interacting with an AI or an actual human being within a video game. I imagine the same thing will also start to occur within the next 5 to 20 years once we see the emergence of robots. There's going to come, it's not that far away. So hear it now, as you probably suspect. The next step from, say, ChatGPT on your phone is going to be some sort of like augmented holographic robot. One, some companies will generate those like holographic robots. Some other companies will opt for physical forms, like physical robots, right? Similar to sort of like an iRobot. And it will walk around with you and help you with your tasks. It becomes a companion. Then the next step after that is they're going to make them more and more realistic. The reason why I suspect they're going to go holographic and lean more towards a holographic presenting robot, especially if you don't need it to do something physical, so it's something like a ChatGPT, is because, well, it's easier to simulate something visually that's going to look human because you have the technology from VR already. So then the next step is just a holographic projection. And it could be something as very simple as like a watch that you wear that starts off sort of where you push the button and it projects from your arm, or it ends up being something that you even maybe wear on your head and projects out, and you push the button and you interact with it. But we're going to start seeing, along with VR, we're also going to start seeing AR, augmented reality, as well. And we're gonna start interacting with virtual objects within our reality as well. So the next 5 to 20 years, barring some fucked up apocalyptic event, is going to be, it's going to feel like we are in some sort of sci-fi reality. And that's quickly where things are going to be heading. And of course, and those who, companies who opt to create physical machine robots, and we're seeing that already, are going to then work with silicone-based products to make them look more and more realistic. And then there's going to come a time when you're going to see organic robots after that, where they're going to start messing with DNA and programming and sort of growing humans in human form, but sort of clones, where then they then interject like a software or wetware that's connected via, let's say, Neuralink, and then that's how it becomes like it's human, but it's a human like Android kind of thing. They will start working with wetware to create biological robots. That's where this is going. There is going to be some pushback. I would hope that there would be some pushback, particularly against the last bit, the genetic engineering of organic robots. And so that will, I think, delay when we see that, if people are like, okay, that's enough. But the way society is going and how quickly I'm seeing people, for example, readily adapting the the VR helmet from Apple, I don't know how much of the pushback. I think if you promise people enough goodies, you promise people enough cookies, they may start to turn a blind eye towards things that, not to be hyperbolic, but may end up bringing about the end of the human species and maybe creating something else entirely on this plane, on this planet. I had an episode about this I put out last year where I talked about how, our fears of humanity ending, it may not be something that's violent. Perhaps humanity ends because human beings will stop choosing human partners and start choosing robotic partners instead. Because we all have an idea in our head of what we want our partners to be. And oftentimes our partner falls short of that. And instead of just accepting people as these imperfect beings, there's still this underlying drive for perfectionism that kind of pushes all of us. You can see that in just on social media even. You see somebody doing something, you go into the comments, and it's just people shredding them because they're not living up to whatever sort of ideal in their mind that they think a person is supposed to live up to. You should be perfect at all times, which, sidebar, by the way, reserve your right to make mistakes and reserve your right to be imperfect. But I think it's this push for perfection that is going to end up turning a lot of people away from human partners to robotic partners, because at a certain point, a human being will not be able to compete with what a robotic partner would have to offer. And I suspect that that will eventually lead to sort of a drop in human procreation, right? You've seen a lot of people, for example, turning away from having biological children and instead adopting dogs. It doesn't always have to be a violent revolution, as we have been programmed with, on television when it comes to sort of the end of the human race. It could be something as simple as just us choosing collectively non-human partners. You've seen this with beetles. In the book, I believe it was in What Is Real by Adam Becker, he talks about this, that there are some beetles in Australia that would forego biological beetles for bottles, beer bottles, because, well, the shape was very similar to a female, like a beetle female, but, well, the bottles were just easier to maneuver. And that's an inherent programming code that it's just DNA going, okay, well, these are the things that you're looking for, just go after that. And you kind of see that sort of same robotic behavior in a lot of human beings. And so to kind of go back, if there are humans who are perhaps quote unquote NPC, as in controlled by the simulation, but they are like already within the game, it wouldn't be difficult to get those people to sort of adapt and take on that partner, which would then influence the behavior of actual conscious subscribers within the simulation, within our reality, so to speak, to adapt certain practices as normative. And before you know it, that becomes the norm. You're also going to start to see, and in addition to that, you're going to start to see the emergence of things like CRISPR, or the re-emergence. I mean, CRISPR never went away, but we're going to start to see that getting pushed as a result of some of the things that happened in 2020 with, COVID and the vaccines and everything like that. You've now kind of opened up the door, so to speak, to get people being okay with slight changes, in DNA, and you're going to start to see medicine sort of emerge that's going to kind of go down that path too. We can tweak this a bit. You're already seeing it with a certain level of genetic engineering where people can choose like the gender and the eye color of their babies. You can go, that's going to be the next step, because once again, we have this weird hard-on for perfection. And on one end, I can understand making sure that you engineer if you want to, right? I can understand using the technology to make it so that, you don't give birth to a child that's going to have issues, health problems. So I get that, the elimination of that. But like all of these things, like everything else in this reality, it's always dual. It's always double-edged, right? So you can come in and say, I'm offering you this. But with that, people are going to take it and use it for other purposes. And to the point where if you now have celebrities or, wealthy people who start engineering their children before they're born and choosing the specs, like choose the specs of the body machine that your offspring can take, well, then it's only a matter of time before the rest of the general public kind of goes, oh, well, I'd like to do that too. And then it only takes another just a little short amount of time for a company to say, okay, well, we can offer that to you. You can offer that to you cheaper and to the general public. And then what it means to be human is going to fundamentally change. But I digress. Go back to what I'm talking about. Right. So I think it was on the 18th or the 17th. That day felt particularly strange because I had a lot of like high energy and I was hyper like focused, but in a really sort of good mood, but in a mood that I'd never really felt before. And even as I'm talking about it, I'm struggling to sort of pinpoint how I would describe it. My husband and I and our family, we all went out for dinner. And then at dinner, I felt high, but I hadn't taken any drugs, right? I just felt a bit not out of it. Once again, it was hyper focused, but not on a task, on just reality as a whole. And I started asking, I remember talking to my stepdaughter, and I said something to the effect of, do you ever just like look at a human face and feel as though like it's off? Like the eyes and the nose, like, do you ever sometimes just sort of disconnect from the appearance of a human face? And I know that we're supposed to be identified with the face and the eyes and the nose and everything like that. But every once in a while, I kind of look and go, this is very strange. Has that ever happened to you? And that within itself is just a very strange thing for me to be talking about at dinner. It's not normal for me. It's normal for me in my mind, but not at dinner and not out the blue. But I remember saying that. And then when I got home, that was when it hit me. I suddenly looked around and I saw our home as though I hadn't seen the home before. And at that point, I became hyper conscious. And we normally have a housekeeper that comes once a week, but all of a sudden I realized like this lady isn't actually cleaning our house. Like I think she's doing the bare minimum, but our house was not neat. It wasn't organized. This is weird because I feel like I've recorded this before. Have I recorded talking about this? Well, I guess we'll find out. I'm going to keep talking about it just in case. But the house just felt as though it was like disorganized. And I looked around and I was just like, this isn't right. And so I just started moving things around. I started redecorating. And I'm doing this at 11 o'clock at night, and I didn't go to sleep till about 4:30 in the morning. Now, for those of you listening, you're probably thinking like, oh, that's just like a manic episode. I am not bipolar. I am not subject to mania. It did not feel like mania, and it has not happened since. The only thing that I could describe was it felt as though I became super conscious. I just became all of a sudden hyper aware of everything that was around me, and I almost felt doubled. And the only thing when I finally went to sleep the next day, the first thing that I could say intuitively was, I don't have an explanation for what happened. Because my husband, like he came down and was like, what are you doing? Because he's looking around. It's like 4:00 in the morning and I'm just moving things around. But once again, it wasn't mania. I didn't have a manic energy. I just felt like things needed to be organized in a way that they hadn't been organized before. And I just became aware of my space and decided to really rearrange it. And it did end up looking really nice, actually. But it also made me question how conscious had I been up to that point? Because I always thought that I was conscious. I'm getting mad deja vu. I always thought that I was conscious up until that day. But then I realized this was a new level of consciousness. This was a new level of awareness. And from that day, it's been a couple of weeks now, 3 weeks now, I think. From that day, I have felt different and then even a bit more aware than I normally am. So much so when I returned back to the UK, one of my friends was like, you seem taller. And when I came back home, my daughter said the same thing. She was like, did you get taller? I do. 3 people actually asked me that within the last 3 weeks. It's not possible. Well, and I guess anything is possible. I don't believe I've gotten taller. I mean, I'm way past puberty. However, people are perceiving me as larger, which is interesting. There's also now a separation between how I normally act and now this hyper awareness of, no, that's really, we don't have to do that. A hyper consciousness of that's the ego doing this thing, but we're going to stay back here and we're going to observe. And it all just happened on that same day. Maybe it's Satori. I don't know. Maybe that's what it's called. Maybe that's what it means. I have no idea. But from that moment, I felt a bit different. Now, my explanation is just another sort of question. I don't have the answer. I don't think I will while I'm in this reality. But the thought process is, and this is something intuitively that I questioned, is it possible? Did a version of me die in a parallel universe and then its consciousness got transferred into this body to continue whatever story is supposed to continue? And that, now I've talked about this in this book. I mentioned this before, but I talked about it in So You're Living in a Simulation when I mentioned NPCs. I redefined or attempted to redefine NPCs as not presently conscious. And I also went ahead and said that anybody at any point in time can become an NPC, no matter how conscious you are, because at the end of the day, the narrative of our lives appear to take precedence, and you can almost get sort of shut down a bit temporarily so that events can occur to move a story in a particular direction. So when we talk about NPCs, I don't mean it in a derogatory way, because I've been very mindful of the fact that sometimes, no matter how conscious I am, I kind of shift down and things happen, and then I kind of come back in and I'm like, fuck, like, why did I react in that way? Which is what led to both the Medium article and the episode where I talked about, could the stories of our lives actually be sentient? Another question, something to think about. Another thing that I talked about in the book is where I said, could there be levels within our reality, within itself? Like, could you have started out on level 1 where you had some level of consciousness, but as you kind of progress, you increase in consciousness, and like water, it sort of like accumulates. It accumulates as it, you can consciousness sort of grow within a person and then sort of move you through levels. But as you also move through levels, the individuals that you interact with also become conscious, or I think more precisely, you get shifted into other realities where the versions of the people that you regularly interact with are now even more conscious, more awake, more aware. So it's more of you shifting through and you leveling up. It's interesting because when I mentioned this to my friend, she said the same thing. When I mentioned that I think that a version of me in a parallel universe sort of shifted into my body, which is, by the way, fantastic to have friends like that where you can say shit like that to them and their question or their response back to you is, oh, it's almost like you leveled up. Fantastic. Get you friends like that, right? Because at the end of the day, what's the recurring sort of ongoing theme? It doesn't pay to have a closed-minded perspective on the nature of our reality. You have people who study, the nature of our reality on a quantum level. You have theoretical physicists, we have mathematicians, you have biologists, you have neurologists who are saying like reality isn't what it seems. And so it's up to us as thinkers to take that information and start philosophizing. Okay, well then what does it mean? Right? Because that is the nature of philosophy. And we need a modern philosophy to accompany a lot of the things that is happening around us. So I don't know what happened on that day. The only thing I can do, obviously, is discuss the possible theories. Is it possible? Maybe. What am I going to do with that information? Well, I am doing what I can do, which is talking to you about it and giving you the information. I had a great conversation with a friend of mine who was talking about how all you can do is be the best possible version of what you are. And I couldn't agree more. We talked about Einstein and how he was a physicist. Could he have better served the world by maybe going to a village in Africa or in Asia and adopting a bunch of orphans and making their lives a better place? Perhaps. But that wasn't in his character. The same for me. Sometimes you sit back and you go like, what am I doing? Am I actually positively impacting this world? And then you get messages and emails and comments from people that are saying, thank you. And then you feel comfortable and go, okay, like I am making some sort of impact. Maybe it's not the same impact as a Martin Luther King or, I don't know, so like somebody on a grander scale. But it's still a butterfly effect enough where if it's one person, even if it's just one person that's listening and is inspired, by an idea, and that idea changes the way they act towards another person, and then that person behaves in a way that they wouldn't normally behave, it's a butterfly effect, right? It's a chaos effect. One small thing, one small conversation, one small podcast, one small book could change the world. My husband always says that one of his favorite movies is It's a Wonderful Life. And every holiday he tries to get us to watch this movie because what he likes about it is that it takes a bird's eye view of an individual, removes that one individual from his town, made it so that he never existed. And you could see how things dramatically change because he wasn't there. This individual wasn't there. And I kind of want to apply that same to you. Be the best version of you, even if it's a something small that you think doesn't really matter or you think is small, which may not actually be small at all. You matter. The things you do matter. As far as a collective hive is concerned, you have to play your role and you have to play the role to the best of your ability. I'm a storyteller. I feel most comfortable writing stories, telling stories, painting stories. That is what I exist, and by I mean the avatar Joe, exists to do in this time frame, is to tell the story. You are fulfilling your purpose just by being. I'll say that again. You are fulfilling your purpose just by being. So accept that and let that be okay. Okay? I'm going to leave you guys with this. Now, this is an idea. It's a thought experiment. It hasn't been properly fleshed out yet because it's something that I just recently started thinking about. And it may or may not be right. But once again, it's a what if. It's something to think about. It's a law of magnetism that I have observed in this reality. I have called it the pushback effect. I've said things like, I've called it the daemon within the game, right? When you have a strong desire for something, the moment you have a desire for something, it triggers the opposite reaction, right? So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Something I've noticed is that the more you desire something, the more the goalposts for what you want gets pushed back a bit. You can Comment down below if you've experienced this. You really want something, you get really, really excited for it. You can't wait, and then boom, you don't get it. And then you go, okay, well, I really wanted this thing. You keep trying, and then boom, you don't get it. And you keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. Eventually you do get it, but gosh, like all of a sudden something that seemed like a sure thing gets kicked all the way away. Is there something happening there that's magnetic? I thought about the idea of opposites attract. So if you desiring something, if the opposite of it is you not getting, what is the opposite of desire? Okay, so let's flip that. If you don't necessarily, if you want something but you don't have a strong desire for it, right? The opposite is essentially whether or not you like attain it. You may not attain it, it doesn't matter. So then that gets attracted to you. However, if you really, really want something, the opposite of the desire is you're not getting it. You're not getting what you want. And so because you strongly want something, you're not getting what you want gets kind of they attract to each other. So the stronger your desire for something, the more you not getting that thing gets attracted to you, which is why I keep saying, you guys, like hope, there's a reason why hope was in Pandora's box of evil. It's not that I'm not saying not to want something. I'm saying that bear in mind that the stronger you're stronger your desire for a thing. And it's okay to have the desire, but there's a reason why Buddha said desire is a root cause of suffering. You're going to suffer. That's the nature of our reality. It is what it is. So hang in there, but just move with the understanding that when you have a very, 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 very strong desire for something, you're almost calling to yourself the opposite of it, which is the non-attainment of the thing that you want. And I find it very fascinating that time and time again, and you've probably experienced this too, it isn't until you let go of your desire for something that you get the thing that you want. It's really, really, really obnoxious, but I've seen this happen time and time again, not just with me, but with people that I care about. The moment they go, okay, you know what, fuck it, I don't even want this anymore. That's when they get it. You see this with relationships. The stronger you have a desire for something to work out, the more problems keep coming. And it's like the opposite of what you want. What you want is for things to work out. But even if you have a strong desire for a person, it's almost like the more you desire the person, it's more like your behavior repulses them. The opposite attracts. You have to keep that in mind. The opposite of what you want gets pulled to you, which is why it's very important to mind your desires, to control your desires, is to not allow your desires to sort of get unbridled and you to the point where you're just like, I'm really, really excited. And look, this is my own personal philosophy. Everything that I say within this podcast is my own personal philosophy. You don't have to agree with everything I'm saying. It's just my observation. It may prove wrong to you, but it's something that I've observed in my own life. And so my counter to that, my reaction to that has been to holding things to go, okay, I do want something, but I don't focus so strongly on it where it becomes like an energetic movement where I'm inadvertently generating like a desire. I just go, okay, well, that would be nice. So like if I'm going somewhere, I'm about to do something, my friends always, and I don't know why they keep asking me, guys, it's always going to be no. they always go like, are you excited? Are you excited for this? And I'm like, no, I'm not excited. I will become excited for the thing once the thing is happening. To be excited prematurely is just going to push that thing away. I don't want that. I know that there's a thing that I have to do. There's a thing that I want to do. If things keep moving in a particular direction, cool. But I'm going to stay cool until I'm in the process of actually experiencing the thing that I want to experience. I think it's also being mindful of staying in the present moment, because I think part of what causes excitement is that you are projecting yourself now into a future where you start kind of hallucinating what you're going to experience. And then you start like you're daydreaming, like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, that, this, and the other. And you're almost pre-experiencing the thing in your mind. So I guess maybe if you pre-experience a thing in your mind, then the counter is the opposite, right? The withdrawal of, okay, now you're no longer going to experience it. If you're already experiencing it in your mind, then maybe that kind of is what triggers the opposite. I don't know. But I do know, and that's what I said to my cousin, is you got to be very mindful of people and their desires for you, and also their fears for you, which I think is also why people tell you if you want something or you're working towards something, don't tell people. It's not that they can sabotage you. I don't believe in the evil eye. In fact, some people could be very, very, very well meaning if you tell them, hey, this is happening. And they can get really excited for you because something good happening to you means something good happening for them. But sometimes in that excitement, they have a strong desire to see you succeed. Because people always want to talk about the evil eye. Nobody really talks about the opposite, where somebody actually genuinely wants you to succeed because of their correlation, or your relation to them, and how you succeeding benefits them. I mean, even it could just be a benefit in the sense of they're just now really proud to be associated with you. But their strong desire for you to sort of achieve something may inadvertently and unwillingly, or unknowingly rather, end up pushing the goalposts. I'm not saying that it diminishes or destroys the goalposts. That's not possible, right? Don't crystallize failure by giving up. But it may, and I talked about this in the episode Failure Rate to Success, but it may push the goalposts back a bit further, where you now end up having to do a bit more to finally get what you want. So I'm not saying that just because you have a strong desire for something, or other people in your life have strong desires for something, but it may end up pushing that timeline in which you achieve the thing. It may end up just sort of repelling it a little bit, to cause it so that you need to put in more time, invest more time before you experience it from happening. It is something that I've observed. It's something that I talked about to my cousin today. I'm not saying this is absolute radical truth. It's just something I want you to keep in mind. It's something I'm definitely going to keep in mind as well. And I have been keeping in mind as well. Is just being mindful, particularly even sometimes my mom will say certain prayers for me. I'm not religious, but she is. And when she's praying over me, there's certain things that she says that I know she means well, but I will cancel it, because if her prayers happen, even though she means well, it could end up kind of be detrimental to the way I want to live my life. Get what I mean? And so if I catch her in a prayer, even if I'm not there to hear her praying for me, I will still consciously just cancel and nullify any sort of prayer or any sort of wishes that isn't aligned with the life that I want to live. And maybe that's an exercise that you could consider taking on as well. I don't know. Like I said, this is just something for you to consider, something to think about. That is the nature of the podcast. We are throwing out ideas, asking questions, philosophy, techno-philosophy. We're dealing with the nature of our reality. We're asking questions as to what are its rules? If this is a simulation, what are the laws that drive it, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's just something to think about. All right. Signing off. Thanks for listening.